are listening to AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who are all about the lyrics. We're your hosts. I'm Jen.
I'm Monty.
And I'm Jody.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift. Today, we are going to be deep diving That's the Way I Loved You. Actually, the song is called The Way I Loved You. How can you listen to the song without just singing it every time? It's been stuck in my head since yesterday. This is a continuation of our conversation from last week where we actually looked at 3 songs from the Psychoanalytic Theory lens. We all brought in 3 songs that we felt reflected that theory for our show and tell. And so if you have not had a listen to that episode, highly recommend you go back and do that, because there might be some things that we don't bring up in today's discussion because we already addressed it last week. Also, it was a pretty meaty topic, and I think we did a pretty decent job considering our lack of qualifications.
Hey, I was a psych major in undergrad many years ago, so super minor qualification there.
Or it was true.
Super minor.
And Jen and I have both studied Freud extensively, so sure. Anyways, The Way I Loved You. What an old throwback song. I mentioned this last week, but it's on Fearless, track 10, first released in 2008 and then re-released as part of Taylor's version of the album in 2021, written by Taylor Swift and John D. Rich. I talked about why I did the song for Psychoanalytic Theory, but I just love the song. It's a fun song. And I think what's really interesting is it has multiple characters. So actually, before we dive in, Jen, do you want to ground us in the rhetorical triangle again so that we have some framework?
Yeah, so we talk about who's the speaker, who are they talking to, and what is the purpose of the song. We've been doing more of like going through the lines a little bit, which I've really enjoyed, but I do think this song is so focused, so like character driven, that I think starting on identifying who are the characters here, and then we can kind of go through the story.
I did say this last week, but I definitely feel like there's 3 characters that we're talking about. There's he, and then there's you, and then there's I, which I feel like is just a lot of her songs. But in this one especially, like you feel like there's 2 guys, and we actually have some hints as to a gender. Sometimes we don't always have clarity into the genders that we're talking about, but here clearly, because she uses he in third person, there's the one perfect guy, and then there's a second person who is actually not gendered, who is anything but perfect, but is the more passionate relationship.
I will confess, it is within the last 2 years I realized there were 2 partners in the song for some reason. I originally, and I don't think it's the correct reading, but for a long time I listened to the song thinking it was the same guy, and that like it was a story of a really passionate relationship that had grown boring.
Ooh,
and now everything is fine, it's going well, but I missed the early days when things were passionate. I don't think that's true. I think the he and the you make that separate, but that was how I listened to it for a long time. And then it was in the last few years I was like, I think these are 2 separate relationships, and it like changed my whole way of saying this song. So I think that's correct, but it was a very interesting moment for me. I thought it was the story of one relationship getting boring.
The only line that actually would indicate the 2 people, which is easily missed, so I don't think you're in the wrong for thinking that at all, but there's this one line that says, got away by some mistake, and now I miss screaming and fighting, kissing in the rain, towards the end. But that is in the bridge, and it's like so far down that it's literally
we went right to the bridge.
Yeah, we went right there. But and like that is the one line that kind of makes me think it's 2 different people, because there's one person who got away by some mistake.
Yeah. I agree with you. It's definitely 2 people.
I think it is too. I think it is a not completely unviable read to have it be one relationship and have, because there's so many narratives too of like, you were a different person when we started dating. So in the song, I was thinking of it as the narrator was separating the one person into who she fell in love with and who he became.
Yeah, I mean, how depressing.
Yeah, that would be very depressing. Well, in the last episode, we talked a lot, and then we'll get more into the speaker again, but it might be interesting to root ourselves in the first 2 stanzas, because it's the juxtaposition of these 2 men and their characters. So he is sensible, so incredible.
So incredible.
All my single friends are jealous. which is interesting. I'm still in my psychoanalytic mindset and the idea of, oh, like I should like him because all my friends are jealous and that competition.
But I think that's the whole first verse is, here are all the things that are good that should mean this is great. But then in the last line of the verse, you said, and I feel perfectly fine, which if you just read that verse alone, perfectly fine. Okay, cool. That could be a good thing.
But the music.
But then you have the but I miss.
Oh,
it changes.
Even before we get to the but I miss, I actually think the way she sings this is really interesting. And this is another lame attempt at us trying to talk about the music. But the way that she goes through that stanza, she's upbeat, boppy. It's like he is sensible. I'm not going to try saying, but it's hoppy and happy. And then she gets to the last line and it kind of slows down and drags on. And I feel perfectly fine, trending downwards.
I think we even get a hint earlier, though. So it all sounds good. He's sensible, incredible. He says everything I need to hear. And it's like I couldn't ask for anything better. The fact that it isn't, and I couldn't ask for anything better. It's like I couldn't ask for anything better.
Or she's a millennial and she says, it's like all the time.
The way that this is written and the number of syllables, to use a whole syllable on like.
That's true.
It's actually more than that. It's like, it's 2 whole syllables, because it could just be I need to hear, and he says everything I need to hear, and I couldn't ask for anything better. To add 2 whole syllables is
very important.
Yeah.
It's saying something.
And the way it starts too, we talk about the audience sometimes. To me, this audience is almost like a journal to the person she misses. I don't think she's actually telling this person, but she does say you, but to me it reads as a journal. If she had started it out saying like she was talking to her single friends, then perhaps it's that fun like, but because it's a journaling more of a thing, it feels as if it's he's sensible and everything's great. And it's like I couldn't ask for anything better. Here's other things he does, but I just feel perfectly fine, as if she's working through the 2 sides of it. I should love this, but I'm feeling quite indifferent towards it.
It's so funny because I always got this, because I think it's because of the screaming, fighting, kissing in the rain, but I always got this visual of the ending of a rom-com, that moment of resolution where the girl goes to that original guy and it's raining outside. They're in the, like, they're fighting and she's, look, like, this guy is perfect, but
The Notebook. It's
but
the
you're
Notebook.
the one I miss.
It's the Notebook.
Yeah, sure.
They scream and fight and kiss in the rain, and they have a volatile relationship. But the guy she marries and ends up with is like perfectly fine. And then at the end,
Lon or whatever his name is. Yeah,
it's been a while.
James Marsden. I think
his name is James Marsden.
Yeah, I can tell you that much.
Well, the Notebook did come out only 4 years before she wrote this song, or before the song came out. So I think it's fair to say it could have been a relevant thing. But also, 2000s were the era of rom-coms, and I do feel like this has such a rom-com-y kind of feeling to it, where it's that resolution speech monologue that always happens at the end. But
I also. Talking about the collective unconscious at the end of the last episode, the idea that Jung put forth that there's these universal human truths, and we see them a lot in storytelling. The love triangle, I don't know if it's as universal as other things, but it's very common. And I do think, as we will get into the next stanza here in the moment, you often get this in the love triangle. One of them is the boring, socially acceptable or typical choice, and the other one is passionate and different. And that often is the contrast in the 2 love interests in a love triangle. It does seem a recurring theme.
I actually, I totally agree with that. I also think like when you have multiple kinds of guys, especially, I love the fact that this last line like ends with you look, like he says, you look beautiful tonight, and I feel perfectly fine. Because I think especially recently, I don't know if this is a more recent pop culture thing, but it's almost become tacky to be like, you look beautiful to a girl, or just talk about the physical experience. Like, yes, women love it when they get complimented on their physical appearance, but there's this idea that a real guy like sees you for more than just beauty. It's like they think you're beautiful, but they appreciate other things about you. And it's almost kind of lame and anticlimactic to just be like, oh, you look beautiful. That's always what the other guy says. The real guy is like, but I think you're amazing and hilarious and you're smart and intelligent and you're going to rule the world. I don't know.
So that where I go with that is in our Pride and Prejudice episode, I think it was in the extra credit, Monty, you talked about Wickham versus Darcy and the ideal husband. And I think this song, again, I think is still about one person, who she's with versus who she used to love. But I think you could get a bit of, not Wickham, sorry, Bingley and Darcy here. Like Bingley is the perfectly fine, sensible, incredible, right? You look, telling Jane you look beautiful tonight. And Darcy is more the screaming, fighting, kissing in the rain. And he's the one that's going to compliment the intelligence and who Lizzie is as a person. Whereas
and he thinks it's beautiful. It's not just
and he thinks
beauty.
It's beautiful.
Like,
it's not, your
like,
intelligence.
Not to say that women don't appreciate being called beautiful, but like,
please tell me I look beautiful tonight,
yeah.
but also compliment my intelligence and my wit and my podcast. Thank you very much.
Well, I was just gonna say, saying someone looks beautiful is very sweet and it can be romantic, but I've had male friends just be like, wow, you look really beautiful if we're going to a nice event.
Yeah.
It's a kind compliment in a consenting way. A man on the street telling me that, don't feel great about that. They're very uncomfortable about that. But if for a romantic partner, I want more. I want to know you see me. I want to see how we're connected. I want more than just a casual, you look really beautiful tonight.
I also think that these days we are so acknowledging of the fact that, I mean, you have like 5 million makeup tutorials online and everything. It's like, if I just spent an hour getting ready for this event, I know I look beautiful. Thank you. It's not like, duh, like no shit. If that's the compliment I'm going to get after spending an hour getting ready, it's like, okay, thanks. I don't know.
I feel like we were so intellectual in the last episode that we're mildly just
here.
like, we just need to relax a little bit.
Okay, moving on.
TikTok.
Well, I'm going to make a literary reference that will tie us into moving on to the next one. It is also very Wuthering Heights by Charlotte Brontë. Heathcliff is the screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain kind of guy. It is interesting. So we've seen the one who's perfectly fine. Let's talk about the next one. And I feel perfectly fine. You mentioned this in the last episode, Monty, but I do think the transition of, but I miss screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain. The but is really important there. It's 2 a.m. I'm cursing your name. You're so in love that you act insane. And that's the way I loved you. The rain is interesting. Very rom-com reference. But screaming, fighting, and kissing in the middle of the night. Cursing their name.
I love the you're so in love that you acted insane in this, because she's talking about that's the way I loved you. But part of the thing that she loved is like, this guy was also so crazy passionate in love.
I actually saw this as more like a third person you, as in this is what you do when you are so in love, you act insane. So that's how I read it and interpreted it.
I could see that, other than the fact that it's your name. Like the fact that she's using you to talk about this other person and then it changes later in the song is what makes me think maybe it's pointed. But it could be a double meaning.
So according to my lyrics, and I use AZ lyrics because I'm in the year 2000 apparently, the first time we get the chorus, it's you're so in love that you act insane.
Yes.
The second time, it's you're so in love that you acted. Insane.
Yes.
So and then it's I'm so in love that I acted insane.
Yeah.
So I think it does. I think we get all
It does
three.
change.
I think the first time is third person you. The second time is second person directly talking to that person you. And then the last time she changes it to I'm so in love that she's actually talking about the way she loved this person.
And actually, now that you mentioned that, the first one doesn't even have you're so in love. It just says so in love that you act
does
insane.
it? Interesting.
Yeah.
Mine has your, but again, these aren't perfect.
Yeah, I'm seeing it's 2 a.m. and I'm cursing your name. So in love that you act insane. So yeah, it could totally be third person. I think like, again, because she was using the you already, like in the line before.
Yeah, it could be implied.
Cursing your name, it could be implied, but it could also just be intentional to have that double meaning. Like maybe it can be like a general, like you tend to act insane, but also like you were acting insane. I think what I love is that fact that it changes over time.
Yeah.
Because it's this idea that
very telling.
this is the way that she loved him, but he also was acting insane, like potentially, like he also loved her in this insane kind of way. So to be loved with that level of insanity or intensity is also a very powerful thing. It wasn't just one-sided. It was on both sides.
Well, and then we have breaking down and coming undone. It's a roller coaster kind of rush, and I never knew I could feel that much, and that's the way I loved you. One thing I think is really interesting here is that we have breaking down and coming undone, and then we go into a roller coaster. Let me tell you, the last thing I want to break down and come undone is a roller coaster that I'm riding on. That is really low on my list of things that I want to experience.
It's a broken roller coaster.
Right together is an incredibly stressful image to me. I don't know if that is the intended way to read it, but it is the way I read it, and it's very stressful.
Yeah. I do like the idea that it's like, I never knew I could feel that much. To me, this whole stanza is about being moved, being pushed to feel something that you thought was not possible, but being changed. It's like the chemistry of your brain changes. Here's a guy that was able to like alter you so profoundly that you start to question everything.
Well, what I think is interesting about that too, because we know that they have broken up. That is clearly what has happened at this point in the song, is even with friends. So this isn't just romantic, but to have someone in your life who helps you uncover a part of yourself that you had previously unexperienced. Maybe they help you find a new passion or a new depth of emotion or something. And then to lose that person does make you feel like you're losing a part of yourself because they were so key in uncovering a part of yourself. That I think that line adds so much weight to this story to me. I never knew I could feel that much until this person. And guess what? I'm not with that person anymore. I uncovered a depth of love that I no longer am accessing because I am with someone who I feel perfectly fine with. Like, what a comparison from experience to experience of uncovering a new depth of love to perfectly fine.
The other thing that comes undone here are the rhymes in this chorus. You have rain, name, insane. Okay. Then you have you, undone, rush, much, you. So the one sheet, like it all just falls. There's no more rhyming. Falls apart.
Yeah.
I don't
Rush
know.
and much kind of. It's an imperfect rhyme.
It's an imperfect rhyme. But
it's
the
like
whole
A B C
D
D B.
Yeah, which is like wild. Like that's chaotic, as is this love. So I think that it fits.
I love that. And then we go back to the
yeah, and then we go back to the verse. But there's not a lot of, it's not a song, it's not a very poetic song. It is more chaotic, which I think is in line with the emotions of the song itself.
Well, and we have, so when we go on to the next side, he respects my space and never makes me wait, and he calls exactly when he says he will. Musically, that is very controlled. It's very rhythmatic.
I have to let you know that I pulled out my music theory book from college to try and help us with some terminology here. I haven't read it yet, so this episode won't benefit from it. I just picked it up last night. But I'm trying, guys.
Well, even just, I should have looked at the rhyme.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, the rhythm.
Yeah, it's very controlled. It's very, he respects my space and never makes me wait. And the other one is more
almost
of
staccato.
a like,
it's staccato.
Yeah,
versus,
staccato. Thank you.
There are some things I know.
But the one before that, it's almost, the way it feels is this rush of emotion that she can't control.
Yeah.
But I miss screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain, and it's 2 a.m. and I'm cursing your name.
Rhythmic and running. It runs.
Yeah. It's a run-on sentence that is just like uncontrollably coming out. And then we immediately come back to very calm, very metered, very simple.
Is a great
meter
word,
is a good one.
Yeah.
I also love the way, again, so we've got in the first verse and the second verse, the way they end, I'm perfectly fine, I'm comfortable. Neither of those two things on their own are bad, but in the context of the song and what it goes into, the but I miss, before it goes back to the chorus, says that those are not good things to the speaker.
Those are things I want to be in my job and not necessarily my main takeaways from a romantic relationship.
I think you need to be comfortable in a relationship.
Yeah.
It's the way that she sings it too. Again,
Yeah.
it drags on at the end, and it's just going from that kind of steady beat to this wah 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 is the only way I can describe it. It's like literally you get this downward. How many more ways? How many more ways should I do this?
We are a podcast that's all about the lyrics, and maybe we should stick to the lyrics.
Imagining the sad trombone. I think it's a sad trombone is the name of the sound.
Yeah. Yes.
It's this sad
I don't hear it as a
trombone.
sad trombone, but okay. I know what you're saying.
Like
I don't
the way that she sings is like, and I'm I don't remember
comfortable. Like it's she doesn't quite end the sentence when she says I'm comfortable, I'm perfectly fine.
but
like,
it trends
it
downward.
trails on, it trends downward. She's not certain. It says it projects an uncertainty.
If it feels
in an anticlimactic way.
Very anticlimactic, and it's like she's describing this relationship and she's trying to end on a positive note, and the best she can come up with is I'm comfortable. Yes, you should be comfortable in your romantic relationship. If you came to me and said, what is the best way you can describe your relationship with your romantic partner? And the best thing I can come up with is I'm comfortable. That's like,
yeah,
okay, ooh.
This will be a great place to plug Matchmaker Maria, who is a dating coach matchmaker and has a great Instagram. But she has all these she does dating rules, whatever. It's great. But people will often ask her, women will often ask her, like, how many dates should I give it before I'm like, this is it. This isn't good, because I don't feel a spark. I don't feel these things. And I think what we're seeing in the chorus might be the spark, might be the passion, which you shouldn't necessarily rely on, because that could also be anxiety. Go back to the last episode, but give it, 3 dates, right? Because comfortable in the first date, or just or boring or dull in the first date. First dates are awkward. It takes 3 dates before you actually get to that point. So I also wonder, this person's met, is close to her mother, and talks business with my father. So she's well past 3 dates.
True.
And to your point, Jen, you're past the point where comfortable is enough. It needs to be more than that. Charming, and you need more.
Well, I kind of want to get into this whole section too, because what interests me about this section, I'm just going to read it because it's short. He respects my space and never makes me wait, and he calls exactly when he says he will. He's close to my mother, talks business with my father. He's charming and endearing, and I'm comfortable. So much of that section.
Great guy. It's just not for you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're right.
Boring.
And the biggest part of this is her parents like him. But there's nothing in here that says she likes him or that she likes anything that's going on here. It's just like he's checking off this objective list of like, okay, these are good. And my parents like him, but I'm comfortable at best.
I think parents liking him can be such a huge thing, because it's so hard to find somebody maybe that your parents like. And so in this situation, I think that is meant to be, that is the ultimate positive. Not only are my friends jealous, and not only does he do all these things, but my parents even like him. How rare is that you find someone that gets along perfectly with your family, and yet
I'm comfortable.
Yeah. If this was your answer, if I asked someone who's starting to date and I was like, hey, what do you think about your partner? And they're like, oh, he respects my space. My parents love him. I'm comfortable. I'd be like, nothing you said makes me think you actually really like this person. Your parents, you were very clear that your parents like him. So you can say that, but you aren't saying you like them.
I'm going to defend the guy. She starts the whole song with, he's sensible and so incredible. So she does say he's incredible.
But I
don't think there's anything wrong with him.
She's saying, to Jen's point, she's saying all things that are objectively about him. She not once says, I love his smile, or I like this.
Right.
She never once says anything about anything that she likes.
Because she doesn't. Yeah, because she doesn't. And I think that's not, but I don't think it's because there's anything wrong with the dude. It's just because she's not that into him.
No, but that's the contrast. The fact that she doesn't do that.
She doesn't like him. Exactly.
Of it is important.
Yeah.
And she's saying why. I don't understand why, because he checks all these boxes. And it's like, well, because you can't manufacture that connection. It's not all about the checklist.
Right. I think she's very clear. This guy's a really great guy. It's just, it's a good friend for her. It's not someone she wants. Because you immediately contrast. So all of the stuff is about him. It's objective, and I'm comfortable. but I'm a screaming, finding, kissing the ring. I'm cursing your name. That's why I loved you. I never knew I could feel that much. Everything about the other guy is focusing on how she feels about this other guy.
It's the use of first person. It's the use of first person only really comes in when she's talking about that more passionate relationship, because she actually feels something.
She does it in the first verse. He says everything I need to hear. I couldn't ask for any more. He opens the doors. So she does use the first person in the first verse, but she doesn't.
Yeah, he says everything I need to hear is something he does. It's not like how she feels. Like it's coming from him, not coming from her.
But it's not. So the feelings aren't in the verses. The feelings are in the choruses. The objectiveness and who the other person is in the verses.
I'm about to be obnoxious. It's the subject of the sentences and the ones about the other guy. It's he. So he says everything I need to hear, but he says, and even the I couldn't ask for anything better. This is where I think that's important. It's like is the noun and the verb of that section of the sentence. If it was and I couldn't ask for anything better, it would make the subject would be I.
Yeah, if we were highlighting the subjects in this, if we were
let's do it.
All the subjects, guy one doesn't get any Taylor subjects or any singer speaker subjects.
Yeah.
To be clear, that's not obnoxious. That is what the purpose of the podcast is, to get this level of nerd. So I just want to clarify, we welcome. Where are the prepositional phrases? I really love prepositional phrases. If we need to get in there, I will get there. Trust me.
Okay, and
it's the subject of the sentences changes.
So talking about the subjects, I think, can we get to the bridge? Because the subject, until now, that guy number one, we shall say, she's only been saying the positives about him, right? But now in the bridge, you suddenly get things that he's missing. Like, he can't see the smile I'm faking, and my heart's not breaking because I'm not feeling anything at all. You finally get her saying something negative about him other than the fact that she's just comfortable and she's not feeling it. He's missing her emotions. He doesn't even fully understand her. This to me is kind of like an extension of maybe like he says you look beautiful tonight, but it's a very surface level. Like, she's now pointing out, like, he thinks I look beautiful, but he's just missed the fact that the smile was fake.
I think she is saying my heart's not breaking, that this isn't working, because I'm actually not even feeling anything.
Yeah, I think that's
the only way I feel things is in the anxiety and the chaos of the other relationship. But with this guy, with the he, I don't feel anything.
Well, that's why I was saying sorry. I was saying sorry, not sorry, because I was like, she doesn't even care that he isn't seeing this, or like she's almost not sorry or apologetic that this isn't going to work out, because she's like, I don't feel anything. And so this is definitely going to end. It's like almost she's becoming objective here.
Yeah, I said it in the last episode. Love and hate are not the opposite ends of the spectrum. They're actually very close on the end of intensity, and the other end is indifference. And this is clearly stating indifference.
So here's where I find it so interesting in our different readings of this song, because you all are focused so much more on how boring the he is and how passionate and exciting the you is, the relationship in the chorus. Whereas I'm like, girl, this is an anxious relationship and an anxious attachment that you have to this guy in the chorus, and that is not healthy. It's not to say that you need to be with the boring guy, but like, why are you so like focused on this guy who caused you so much anxiety and was frustrating and to you?
Okay, well, I have an answer, kind of. And that's
I do too. Let's see if it's the same.
It's in the title of the song, because she loved this guy. Like, the difference is this emotional. You have a guy who is perfectly nice, but she loved this other person. And how can you forget that love? Love is such a strong word. Mm-hmm. And of course you have these strong emotions because that's the way she loved him.
And not only did she love him, I never knew I could feel that much. Not only did she just love him, she uncovered a new intensity of love.
She leveled up.
Feelings. She leveled up.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a great relationship, and I think a key part of this narrative is that relationship's over. She misses it, but she did leave it. Like, it's not, she's not in that relationship.
Did she leave it? Got away by
some mistake. Yeah.
It has been left behind one way or another.
She's not in it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if this were a modern rom-com, the conclusion would be the main character walking away from both relationships to
choosing
find
herself.
a happy compromise. And find someone who inspires her passion, but who is kinder, who is gentler, who is not going to do the screaming and fighting in the rain, who will do the kissing in the rain. I mean, you'll fight. It happens.
I mean,
but
not to this extent. Fighting is normal.
But nothing in this song actually indicates how toxic maybe the fighting was. Like, it just says screaming and fighting. It doesn't say we were beating each other up. Like, it's not like there were bruises or was fire. I mean, she says,
"Should throw my phone across the room at you." Like, right.
I'm just saying that as far as like lyrics go, like, I think we can get more violence. It just says screaming and fighting, which doesn't sound particularly crazy. But other than the fact that she says we acted insane, like the act insane, which is, it's still vague. Like, I think you can act insane in love and all fair in love and war and poetry and whatever. But I think there's enough subtlety that we don't know how toxic necessarily the relationship was. Maybe it wasn't like the ideal. Clearly it's over, so it doesn't matter. But I think the fact remains is that this one was a love and it made her feel something. And
the other one's not.
And the other one's not. And we talk about great loves and the fact that you can have multiple, or the fact that that's like a thing to aspire to. And I think even the realization that I think people spend a lot of times in relationships where they'll spend years and then they'll have this realization and be like, there's just no love. Yeah. Like, there's just like everything else is great, but there's no emotion.
Well, and we get more about the passionate man in the second half of the bridge. And you were wild and crazy, just so frustrating, intoxicating, complicated, got away by some mistake, and now. And the word intoxicating is always so interesting to me.
I was going to say that
one
too.
Of those that's like, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know.
Well, you said the word toxic, Monty, in that we don't know if this was a toxic relationship, which made me think of our toxic relationships episode. Loved that one. So the word intoxicating is an interesting
It's choice. Not quite the same. Yeah. It's definitely a different word. It does make you feel like something that can take you out of your senses and makes you not think clearly. Like, sometimes when you're intoxicated, you're not in your right state of mind.
Which is the same thing as love. Love will do that as well.
But love will do that too. Yeah. Exactly.
Etymology moment. One of my favorites. This was a quick Google, so if I'm wrong, sorry, but I'm seeing multiple pieces of evidence for it.
Google.
So the Greek word toxon means bow or arrow, and so toxicon was basically like you would dip arrows in poison, and that gave rise to the Latin verb intoxicare, which means to poison. So intoxicate essentially means to poison. Of course, we have changed what it can mean, but also now more commonly you would think making drunk. So if someone is intoxicated, they are drunk. You are not. There is some poison, drug, some substance that is making you not in your right mind. So to call someone intoxicating is there was something about them that kind of changed your senses and you were unable to function.
It's the same
in your standards. You're not sober when you're with them.
It's the brain altering, the brain chemistry altering agent. But to Jody's point, love can also do that. You can say you're love drunk. You can say that love has an intoxicating effect. So it doesn't necessarily, again, have to be a negative thing. But yeah, it's an interesting conversation about like connotation, right? Like that's an interesting, frustrating, intoxicating, complicated. Like me reading this, I'm like, complex, but not necessarily negative. Like these can also all be positive things. They also can be negative things.
Depends on what quantity and to what extent.
Yeah, they're all kind of words that have two definitions. So you have intoxicating. I'm just Googling it from Oxford Languages. You have an alcoholic drink or drug that can cause intoxication. And then you have exhilarating or exciting. Like these are the two main definitions of this word, which have two very different experiences. And I think a lot of those words that she uses there does that. Complicated's not bad.
No.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Frustrating. Sometimes
even like
frustrating has a negative connotation, but challenges are fun. You don't want to live life where you're never once frustrated.
You're never
you're never
challenged in a
growing.
relationship.
Yeah.
Even wild and crazy, like crazy, I think maybe has slightly a negative lean on connotation, but it's balanced out by wild, which I think you always hear young, wild, and free.
And you contrast that with, because I'm not feeling anything at all, and
Yeah.
you were wild and crazy, and so you've got the relationship she's in now where there's nothing, it's completely neutral, and you are wild and crazy, and so I think that she's using that in a positive connotation.
It definitely feels intentional that she picked these words that could go either way. It's like you're looking for words that specifically are not obviously like one or the other intentionally.
I'm going to extrapolate a little bit here.
What we do here.
But I think it's we don't get this from the text, but so we see these two guys. So one is boring. The
Poor
way
guy.
I see them, he's also very kind. Like I see them as like, you know, an office worker wearing his button downs, and he's very responsible and has his 401k,
Jim
and he's
from The Office.
Yeah. Yeah. So then obviously Dwight's the passionate, you know, screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain guy. But yeah, so you have that, and then you have this other person who is wild and crazy and intoxicating, and even outside of the context of relationships, the people you are the closest to, I mean, we even had the line, I never knew I could feel that much. The people you are closest to bring out sides of you. And I think there's something going on here too, where maybe I'm just still in my psychoanalysis of this person.
Masochism. The masochistic death instinct.
Yeah, but also this person has their like the id and the ego of this is what I should do, but this is what I want to do. Maybe I want to be wild and crazy. Maybe I want to be passionate. So this person brings that out in me. I can do that with this person. And then, but I need to be responsible. So you're with this person because that's what you feel like you should be doing. So I feel like you're seeing those two sides, but it's also coming into the speaker of the two sides of the speaker. And that makes sense to me. As much as you need to be responsible, it's not fun all the time.
Right.
If you're only surrounded by responsible people who are never going to be like, let's go do something weird. And it doesn't have to be, you know, doing 10 shots at a bar, but just, you know, I went to see Mamma Mia with friends last night. And at the end of Mamma Mia, you stand up and they like kind of play like a concert and you're dancing. And I was having a great time. I was at a musical, you know, it wasn't
the best concert.
Wild, crazy time. But it was fun just for a moment. We were just down in shots left and right, and then got home at midnight, and we were so tired at midnight.
It's like a lose your inhibitions moment of just going wild, and that's like a positive definition of the word wild, where it's like not dangerous, but or like deadly or harmful in any way. Well, it's like a happy wild,
letting go of what you should be.
I also think. The first line of that bridge, he can't see the smile I'm faking. That says so much that she is not herself in this relationship.
I mean,
yet
struggling to put on a smile for a guy that otherwise seems perfect on all
move on.
Like,
he's not for you, and that is okay. We're getting to my purpose of the song, so I'll pause there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely because smiles are just something that sometimes you shouldn't have to fake.
Do we want to get to the purpose? Are we ready?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, is there anything else? No, we're circling the purpose. Let's just do the purpose.
I see the purpose of this song as this is the person really getting over their first big love and moving on and dating and realizing that not everything will be that first big love, but also you don't need to just go through the checklist. And like you're not going to get your check. The checklist isn't everything. I'll just read you what I wrote down. The first thing I was really flippant. I was like, get couples therapy, but more so for the chorus guy versus the verse guy. I'm like, this guy's just because he checks all the boxes doesn't mean he's for you, and that's okay. So I have two purposes. That's my purpose for the verse guy. For the chorus guy, get some couples therapy so you can really like recalibrate what a healthy relationship looks like. Because again, I don't know that it's unhealthy, but there's enough in the chorus for me that's a bit of a red flag that this is a very anxious dating style, a dating attachment, that the way you loved somebody is through screaming and fighting and acting insane. It's a bit of an extreme. So the purpose of this song is to realize that in getting over your first big love, it's not all going to be like that, but you also can't just go by a checklist and maybe find a therapist to help you find a healthy balance in your dating life.
I kind of like your Goldilocks conclusion of like, this one was too big, this one is too small. I need one that's just right.
Just right. I love that. Thank you. That was much more. That was you put that way better than I did. So thank you for seeing that.
But I do kind of like that. I like this idea that like sometimes when you're in the relationship, you can see all these red flags and you're, this is not working out. I'm frustrated. We need to get over it. And I do think that we talk about how one of the big differences between dating and then marriage is the commitment. Like once you're married, you're locked, and it's harder to get out of it. Not to say that you shouldn't get out of a toxic relationship, but just it's harder. There's more hoops to jump through. It's not as easy. And so when you're kicking and or screaming and fighting, kissing in the rain, you're like, you just got to work through it rather than just be like, I quit, I'm leaving. And I think in this case, like there was a relationship where she definitely felt a big love, but by some mistake it ended. And I think a lot of good relationships can end that way because just think it's not worth it. And then you have to compare it or contrast it with something to realize like, actually, yes, we had ups and downs and it was tumultuous or whatever, but that was like, at least I felt something, and it was that way because we felt something. Maybe it was like that because we cared so much. Whereas this other relationship, you get out of a relationship like that and you're like, well, this time I'm just going to stick to my list and I know what I want, and I'm going to make sure that we get the guy that checks all these things. And then you're like, what am I doing? What is this list? Life doesn't work in lists. Like you can't.
What we didn't really say, or we said without saying, is to your point, Monty, the contrast between the two. She's checking the boxes with the guy in the verse. Does that mean that the guy in the chorus didn't check any of those boxes, but they had this passion, this love?
Yeah. And we have, I know when we get to the conclusion, the discussion is over, but I just feel like our listeners will kill us if we don't draw the parallel between Mr. Perfectly Fine. Like I feel perfectly fine.
I had
Mr.
that thought
Perfectly
too.
Fine.
Thank you.
We didn't bring it up. The interesting thing about that song is Mr. Perfectly Fine is the one who moves on after a breakup and is casually cruel and ends up being the one that like didn't even care. And here she feels
She's perfectly fine.
But at the same time, maybe this guy also will just move on and be fine. It's like he's a guy that checked the boxes and everything seems fine. But if there's nothing there, then it's just as likely as the other person will also move on and it'll be fine. It's just two people who are not meant to be. And just because something checks all the boxes doesn't mean that you need to stay in it. And so
she says casually cruel and Mr. Perfectly Fine too.
Yeah.
Damn, these webs go. She weaves the invisible string is long.
I think for me, I think maybe I'm just kind of slow to processing of what you said, Monzi, in last week's episode of the id and the ego here. And it wasn't until we were deep diving it that I was like fully processing that. So I think I have kind of two purposes. One, within the context of the author, audience, and purpose, I do feel I could see this being a like rom-com, like In the Rain, making this speech. To me, it comes across still very journally of like writing a letter to an ex that you're never going to send, but you just need to write it. And that in the context of that triangle, that this is someone who's working through, why don't I feel strongly about this person who seems wonderful? So it's because the song itself has that back and forth of like, he seems great, but I miss this. But here's everything else that's good about him. Yeah, but I still miss this. Like it's this just. And then, as always with the bridge, it changes, and that's like the breakthrough journaling moment of like, oh, it's because he doesn't see me. It's because I don't actually love him. And you were crazy and wild, but I loved you. Okay, I'm understanding what's happening now. I think, to me, hearing the song, one of the other purposes is, yes, it is within a relationship, but I think it just speaks to that. I still do this at 30, but it also speaks to that like younger discovery of that like id and ego, and you're having these kind of extremes of, well, mom and dad say I need to do this, or society or school says I need to do this, But then as you are growing up, you start realizing some of those intrusive thoughts. You're like, okay, but that sounds kind of fun. Like maybe I'll try that, or
But I don't like it.
maybe I don't. Yeah, and I think that's part of growing up, is seeing those two sides, and this song captures that tension to me really well, and I appreciate that. And I also think part of the growing up process that I frankly am still not good at is finding those, do what you need to do, but also finding those moments and finding those people where you can let loose, where you can let go of expectations. Screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain, 2 a.m., I'm cursing your name, is all very intense, but they're all very raw and very sincere. And the main problem with the other guy is that he doesn't see her for who she really is. And I think that, to me, is, as we have talked about it, has come up for me as cutting to the core of the song, is society won't always see you for who you are. And that's fine. You don't need everyone to see you for who you are. But finding some people who do see you and trying to find a way to balance that with maybe not as much of a constant intoxicating, wild and crazy feeling is very important. And like the growing up version of this is finding that, not too big, not too small, just right. But finding that
Goldilocks.
and finding
Goldilocks.
and finding those people, and they don't have to be romantic. I feel I can be myself around my partner, but I also have a couple of really close best friends who I can just be very weird with. And then if anyone saw our group Slack chat, they would be like, these 3 women are unhinged. And we'd be like, we sure are. Listen to our podcast.
A lot of screaming and fighting over here.
But it's all out of love. It's all out of love.
So in love that we act insane.
Oh, I love it. Well, that's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Tune in next week as we unpack another Taylor Swift song. That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.